Hi guys, welcome back to another video. It's another top 5 video. I'm joined with my buddy Kevin again today. Hello Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So we did a video, I don't know, a few weeks ago maybe, a top 5 um, solo games, I guess is kind of what we called it. And so
Yep.
ever since we got off the chat with that one, we were like, oh, what's the next one we should do? And
Yeah.
we were coming up with ideas and stuff like that. And so what we came up with today is what the title of it is going to be, and I'll have to kind of explain it because the title is a little wonky. Is it's going to be top 5 underrated games. That's what the title will be. But for me, and I'll throw it to Kevin in a second. For me, I basically went for games that I think we both did. Games that are available. You can look them up on Amazon. You can probably just pick them up right now, like today, as you're listening to this video. And games that are within the last 10 years. So they're not like super old, like they're underrated because they're from some old Parker Brothers game or Hasbro game. And it's like, well, no one plays them because that game is like a dead game or something like that. And so how I ranked them and how I put them on my list is based on like, for me, it's a little bit different. And I know Kevin will explain in a second, but I'll just go first. For me, there are games that I enjoy that I know that people don't enjoy. And I know why, but I still enjoy them anyways. So games that are maybe too long, too slow, too complex, too whatever, just not good, like streamlined games that are just kind of bad, but I still like them. Like nobody wants to play them. And so I feel like they're underrated because it's like, yeah, okay, so you have that one character that's like OP or whatever, but I still like it. Or yeah, the game's a little wonky and it probably takes too long, but I still really like it. So my list is going to be 5 games that I really like to play, even though I know the community out there and people that I've played them with are not really big into them. That they're not the evergreen games that people talk about. And so I have my games with me, so I'll be kind of showing them off. And I know Kevin has his games with him. So Kevin, go ahead, talk about kind of how you ranked your underrated games.
So I did mine in a way that I think these games are all good, and I think that they should get a little more love than they do. And it's games that are good that I don't think people are talking about. And for some reason, they drop lower on a ranking, like on BGG, or they find their way into a clearance bin or a clearance rack. And so people often gloss over these games, and they're missing some really good games out there. And I kind of rank them from 5 is the one that I least enjoy to 1 is the one that I most enjoy.
I kind of did that too,
Yep.
for the most part. Yeah, 5 is one that's like, yeah, I like this game, but I can also be talked into not liking it maybe or understanding the problems
Right.
with it. And then number 1 for me, which we'll obviously get to, I just be like, man, I really enjoyed this game,
Yep.
and I don't know why because everyone else hated it. so
Yep.
so that's kind of how we're going to do them. And I've got my games here, and Kevin told me he's got his games. And so we're going to start off. I'll start with you, and we'll just go with our number 5.
All right. So my number 5 is a game called Neverland Rescue. And Neverland Rescue is a 2-player game, and you're really playing 2 different games because you have the Peter Pan side or the Captain Hook side. Captain Hook is trying to find all of Peter Pan's hideouts and using some deductive reasoning. So if not this, then that. And he gets clues from Peter Pan as he goes on. Peter Pan is trying to collect cards and rescue a certain amount of people. He could be trying to rescue mermaids or lost boys, or there's one other one that I can't remember. And so he's trying to collect cards, and he's kind of trying to wait out the clock and maybe bring that out. So it's a really good game. It came out in 2018. It's by Litman Games, produced or it was made by Scott Alms. He's the one that has done all of the Tiny Epic games, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And this game right now, at the time of recording is available for like $17.50, and I think I saw it on Cool Stuff Inc. for like $13. And for that price, this game is a good steal. It's a good game. I just don't think a lot of people are talking about. So check it out, Neverland Rescue, my number 5.
And it's a 2-player only game.
Yes, it is
Wow.
2-player only.
I do like those games, like just the 2-player kind of back and forth. Some of them don't really work out that great, but when you can get one that really just hits the sweet spot or whatever, yeah, I do like that one. I don't know if the theming really grabs me though. Peter Pan,
Okay.
I don't know.
And I think that's fair. I would say that this is great for kids. It says 12 plus on the box. I think you could break this out with your 8-year-olds a little higher, and you would be fine to play with them. There's nothing graphic in it. So it's kind of just cute, fun artwork. I will say I am worried about balance a little bit. I think the Hook faction tends to win more than the Peter Pan faction. I need to play it a few more times to figure out if that's true, but I've played it probably 4 or 5 times, and that was kind of my experience. But still, it's a good game that's at a solid price.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've not heard of that one. Usually 2-player games are pretty short, right? Is it a short game?
It says about 30 to 45 minutes on the box.
Oh.
I think you could get a game in about 20, 25, depending on how fast you're going. I think you could.
All right, cool. So my number 5 is based on an IP. Not only is it based on an IP, but it's based on a computer game IP. And so it's a kind of an engine building game where you're kind of building things up and collecting resources, and there's different ways that you can go about winning the game. And you have lots of different options. I believe you have 5 different areas. You can only do one option that you can kind of sort of level up in. And so that's the game for me. Number 5 is not Sid Meier's Civilization, but is Sid Meier's Civilization: A New Dawn. And so this is kind of, for those Civ fans, this is based on a computer game, as I said. There is a old 2001 or something big beast that's Civilization. I'm not putting that on my list. I'm putting A New Dawn on my list, which is kind of Civilization light, I guess. It plays quicker. It's easier to play. The board is modular, which I guess the old one was too. I enjoy playing this, but it is not a flawed or a perfect game. It's got some flaws in it. There's really no combat in it. I mean, there is. It's kind of like the way you feel about Scythe. Like, it's like, oh, there's combat, but it's not really. Right. There's really not a lot of player interaction. Sometimes they try to make the modular board tight enough so that you're kind of fighting over areas, but for the most part, it's like you can kind of sit back and just look down in front of your own little capital city and just do your thing and level up and get in your technologies and things like that. So there are 3 ways to win the game, through like culture and expansions and things like that. And so it kind of is like trying to pretend like it's a 4X game, but it's super light. And people just thought that it's by Fantasy Flight Games, so the production is great. I really enjoy it. I have it in my collection. I don't plan on giving it away or getting rid of it. I'd like to play it some more. I want to try all the different factions. So far, Japan's my favorite, but nobody really plays it, and I think it's got a pretty low rating on BGG. The last time I checked, like a 6 point something or whatever, and I still really enjoy it. I think it's pretty underrated. It's got some kind of good fun to it, but I think because it's coming in the shadow of a much bigger game and they just kind of abstracted a whole bunch of stuff out, people just disregard it as rubbish. I don't. I like quicker games. I like what they did with it. I really enjoy it. So number 5 is not Civilization. It's Civilization: A New Dawn by Fantasy Flight.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've played this once with a friend of mine. And I don't know if I remember a ton of it. I think I thought it was just okay. But I was a fan of the computer game. I played
Yeah.
many hours of Civilization 3. So yeah, good pick. So all right. My number 4 is a game in a series of games. This is by a company called Facade Games, and they have decided that they are going to make games that look like books. And so this is the box for the game, and this game is called Tortuga 1667. And I have the other two in this series. I have not played them yet. They have kind of just sat on
Oh,
my shelf of shame. And I've heard that out of the three of them, this one has the most game to it. The other ones are a little more random and a little less choices. And so they're okay, but they're not good. And I think this is a decent social deduction game. What it is you are pirates on different ships, and you are trying to collect as many treasure chests as you can and either put them in the French hold or the British hold. So some players are French, some are British, and if you have an odd number of players or if you play with a variant, there might be a Dutch player as well. And so you want to have the most treasure at the end of the game. So it's a constant tug of war, and it's back and forth, and it plays really quick. I tend to like social deduction games. We play a lot of Secret Hitler when our game group is going. That's one we turn to almost every week. I played Resistance quite a bit before that.
hmm
And so this one doesn't really stress me out in the same way that Secret Hitler and the Resistance does, because you can, when you're playing those games, you can know that somebody is on the wrong side and call them out, and then they just lie their way out of it, and then nobody believes you, and it's sometimes a recipe for frustration. And I don't find that as much with Tortuga, because it does matter if people know who you are, but it's hard to mitigate that. So that's my number 4. You can pick this up at Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon. And it's just a game that I don't think enough people are talking about.
We did play this the one time you kind of set it up and explained it, and at first I wasn't on board. I was just like, it's a social deduction game with a kind of a board where you're
Yep.
pulling back and forth, a tug of roping kind of like back
Yep.
and forth between
Yep.
these two ships and stuff. And so I wasn't really on board at first, but as we started to play, I was like, oh, okay, I really do. I do like that game. I've only played it the one time with you,
Yep.
but I would actually really like to play it again. And so that's a pretty good pick. Did you win a tournament or something with this? Weren't you kind of bragging once about?
So that was another pirate game that I almost considered for this list, and that's called Skull King, which is a trick-taking game. But
That's the one that you played.
yeah, I won at a convention, and so I got a trophy, and I started playing with some friends. And after that weekend, they just started calling me Pirate Kevin, and to this day, that's how they know me. So
Pirate Kevin.
that's right.
Well, I bring that up as kind of a segue into my number 4, because I did actually take third place in a tournament for my next game. So the game for my number 4, this is the one game that I do not have an actual box for. And so what the game is it basically takes the idea of Magic the Gathering, which people love. It takes all these different factions of superheroes, which people love. They love like Spider-Man and like Wonder Woman and all these superheroes. And it adds in, oh boy, the element of dice. And so the game is called Dice Masters. I don't have an actual box. This is just a huge Plano thing that I have of all my Dice Masters stuff. And so Dice Masters is essentially kind of a Magic the Gathering sort of game, but with dice instead. Yeah, I know Kevin plays as well.
I might mention this a little later, but spoiler alert.
Okay, well, I'll not beat it to death as far as how it's played, but just to get a sense of it, it's you pick your heroes that you want to play with, and there's certain limitations on how many dice you can have or whatever. And it's a bag building game. For those of you that don't know, you'll have a bag that you kind of draw from, and when you add new dice, you throw them into the bag. So you could be drawing like Hulk or She-Hulk or whatever. You get a chance to roll them, kind of Yahtzee style, like you get 3 chances to roll, and then you field them and they fight. So it works essentially. I hate to say Magic the Gathering because it's not exactly like that, but it's the closest thing that I can compare, because a lot of people do play Magic. And this is one thing that I would recommend to Magic players, like, hey, if you're looking for something different, pick up some Dice Master sets. You can pick up Marvel, DC. I know I picked up some DC sets at Walmart at one point. The next set was there's Ninja Turtles. I think GI Joe is the next set. There's even Dungeons and Dragons if you and your buddies like a D&D kind of theme. And you have different sides. The dice have different sides as far as like their combat value, their hit. It's simultaneous combat, just like Magic the Gathering. I did take third place in a Dice Masters tournament, and so you might be saying, hey, why is this on your underrated games if there are tournaments being played?
Yeah.
Well, there aren't anymore. I think the game is almost practically dead. Kevin Anderson, the one of the designers, kind of spoiled the GI Joe expansion that's kind of coming out, and I think there may have been another Marvel type one that just came out and adding more stuff or whatever. But I don't really hear anyone talk about this game. Or play it a whole lot. We used to have tournaments here in the town that I live in, which is where I took third place one time. They don't do it anymore. People just lost interest. They stopped buying the dice, they stopped buying the cards, and just kind of stopped playing. I still really enjoy it. I don't really play it anymore because I don't have anyone to play with, and Kevin lives kind of a distance from me and stuff. So I know I had a pretty kick butt Ninja Turtles kind of set up theme one time. So you can pick themes. You can have Ninja Turtles, and Kevin can play Dungeons and Dragons. People, you can have like My Little Pony or whatever, and just kind of like create your team to play with, and they all have special abilities, and it's all about comboing. So I think I've probably said too much, since we'll probably talk more about it later. But my number 4, right, is a game called Dice Masters by is it WizKids, I think.
Yeah. I want to stick a pin in it for now because that's one of my honorable mentions. So we'll talk about that a little bit once we wrap up.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just move on to 3.
My number 3 is a game that I found at a convention. One of the local game stores was there, and they had a clearance shelf of like 60-75% off. And I picked up this game, and I just kind of said, what the heck? And gave it a go. And it's a game about growing and blending coffee beans together. And it's a game by Dice Hate Me Games called Viva Java. And this game actually sat on my shelf of shame, on my unplayed shelf, for a good year or so. And I was at an event with a bunch of buddies of mine. We just got a cabin in Wisconsin and played games the whole weekend. And I finally broke it out, and it's good. It's all about you're blending coffee together. It's a bag building game. So you are taking beans and you're putting them into your bag, and then you will pull them out to make the best kind of coffee you can make, sort of a la poker style. So if you get 5 of the same kinds of beans, then that's going to be the best one. And so it's semi-cooperative, because in the beginning, you have regions of the world, and you will go there to collect beans. And then you will decide, hey, do we want to blend, or do we want to research to make it easier to pull out the beans that we like? A caveat on this game: when we were playing, the rule book is not good. And me and my buddy, who also plays a lot of games, we were teaching it kind of together, and we read over one rule. I think we each read over it 2 or 3 times, and didn't completely have an understanding of it. So it's not great, but you can pick this game up for probably low 20s, high teens right now. And it's just a game that people are not talking about. I think it deserves a little more love. So that's my number 3, Viva Java.
I've not heard of this. Was this a Kickstarter?
This is from Dice Hate Me Games. It was just reprinted in 2017, I believe. And there's a 2012 version as well. I don't know if I could tell you where Dice Hate Me. Greater Than Games is also on here, listed as a publisher. So it's very good.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Is it another 2-player game, or
so this one plays 3 to 8 players, so that's kind of nice that it plays more. There is a potential for kind of a strong arm move, because you have 3 regions of the world and each have 3 spots to go to pick your beans at the beginning. And then whatever region you're in, that's the people you will decide to blend or research in. If there's a tie when you're voting, you automatically research though. So if I'm coming into an area and be like, hey, I've got a lot of sweet stuff in my bag, we should blend this turn. And then someone else comes along and says, okay, and then they vote to research, well, we're going to research. And so that happened to be a couple of times while we were playing. It's a little frustrating, but it's a good game. It's a resource collection, bag building, and it's solid.
So I'm going to be just brutally honest on this, because that's how we are. Sometimes you come across a game and it might be solid. People might say like it's a solid game, and the mechanics all work perfectly. It's not wonky. It's kind of a smooth game, but the theme is just like, not for me.
Yep.
And that's how I feel. Just like, it's a game about making coffee. Nothing against the designers or the company or anything. Great. Like, keep making games that are about other things than just trading in the why can't I say that word? Mediterranean.
Yep.
Yeah. But it just doesn't, sometimes the theme just doesn't hit you and you're like, nah, not too like excited about that. There was another one that I think you maybe talked me into getting some interest in. I think it's called Parks, where again I was like,
yes.
that theme, I'm sorry, it just snooze. Yep. But then I kind of saw some of the stuff you were talking about and posting pictures, and I was like, ooh, okay, maybe I can get in this game. I have not played it. I have not picked up a copy or played it at all, but I definitely have changed my mind. So maybe you'll have to try to change my mind on a coffee game.
Well, and maybe I'll see what I could do. So
maybe it's for coffee drinker. Maybe I'm being really super subconsciously subjective because I don't drink coffee. I don't care for coffee. So maybe that blends into like, I don't care for the theme.
And I think that's totally acceptable. I am a pretty big coffee drinker in general. So I'm a little bit more drawn to it. So I think it's kind of whatever you're into. When I first saw Wingspan, I'm just like, birds. Who cares? And then I played it and I'm like, oh, this is very good. Yeah. And so, yep, I totally understand that one.
Could be the same thing with me.
Yep.
And a lot of people hear like viticulture is about making wine, and they're like, well, I drink lots of wine. I love this game. And then it's like, it's
maybe not.
It's way too complicated for just average, just basic beginner kind of gamer. Yeah. And so number 3, right? Juan?
Yes.
So I love Splendor. This is not really a Splendor killer for me, but what it does is it takes Splendor. So it's this idea of kind of building up and building an engine to be able to get to your final objective. It gives it theme. It gives it a much better look, in my opinion, because Splendor didn't have a really great look. It had no theme, really zero theme, just collecting gems and stuff. This one gives it a little bit of a story. You can kind of, if you really push it, you can give it a story. And so what I do is I kind of, when I teach this game, I talk about it as kind of a Splendor mechanism, but with a little bit more theme and story. And that is a game called Call to Adventure.
Oh.
So in Call to Adventure, you are building your character and kind of going through their life, going on quests, taking on monsters. It works the same way as Splendor. I'm not going to go exactly into all the rules as far as it goes, but it's got kind of a middle area where you have certain symbols that I can get this card, which then adds to my tableau, which means I can do more in the future. It goes through 3 rounds. Everyone has a Final Destiny card. So at the end, you flip over your Final Destiny, which is something that you're kind of secretively working towards to get extra points at the end. It has an alignment. So based on what cards you do, you can go like up in your alignment towards like the sun, there's a sun and a moon. So it's basically like light and kind of dark side. And so you end up at a certain alignment spot, and the game is really kind of wonky, and that's why it's on my list, because I do enjoy playing it. I've probably played it 4 or 5 times. I'd like to play it a dozen more times. There's actually an expansion for it. I have no clue what the expansion adds, maybe just more cards. So there is more to it that I will get the expansion at some point. But when I've played with people, it's really been kind of a meh scenario where I'm like, oh, that was fun. How much did you get? Add up your score. I had 23 points. What did you have? And people are just kind of like, yeah, okay, what's next? What's on? And I'm like, I really like this game. It doesn't kill Splendor for me, because I think Splendor is a much more accessible game that has a little bit more, like I said, theme and narrative to it, and some special action cards you can play that kind of change up the game, and you can kind of break the rules because you're playing a special card. But Call to Adventure is one that I really enjoy, that other people just aren't super like getting in the seat, to play, and I am. And so I feel like it's kind of underrated. It's a pretty solid game, in my opinion.
This is a pretty decently new game, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's got an expansion, so I should probably give some plugs here. It plays 30 to 60 minutes, 1 to 4 players, by Brotherwise Games. Came out in 2018.
Okay. Yep.
Name of the Wind and Call of the Stormlight, or whatever. Those are the expansions that are coming out. So only one expansion is out, as far as I know right now.
Okay.
Name of the Wind.
Yeah, I've definitely seen this one at Barnes & Noble, and I don't know, it didn't strike my fancy of like, I have to pick this game up. So yeah, maybe that's one to check out. Cool.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so my number 2 kind of brings me back a little bit. I really love trick-taking games. I love games like Hearts and Spades and Euchre, and I just find that those play well with a lot of different people. I think a lot of people grew up, depending on where you're from, playing Bridge and Euchre and Pinochle, and so they really enjoy those as well. And there's a few different ones that I considered putting on this list, and then I didn't because they're old or hard to find or a little obscure. But I ended up putting on a game by AEG, and this one is called Custom Heroes. And Custom Heroes is in AEG's card crafting line. So what it is you have clear plastic cards in sleeves, and then you can add other stuff into them. So this one says it's a trick-taking game. It's really a shedding ladder climbing game, because you're trying to get rid of all of your cards before everyone else can. And it plays a lot like a game that I've played before. Sometimes people call it Class Struggle. Sometimes people call it P&A, Presidents and Buttholes. I'll try and keep it PG here.
Right.
And so where you're trying to get rid of all of your cards, The problem is in that game is if you end up in last place, then then whoever's tops takes cards away from you and gives you their cards, and you might stay in that position for a while. And Custom Heroes, what it does is if you come in last place for a round, you get more cards to put them in to make them more powerful. So, excuse me, you can change a 5 to an 8, so now you have 3 8s in your hands, or you can get these other power-up cards and things that do different things to make the cards different, and so it's constantly changing, and it's just a lot of fun. It has kind of some anime style artwork on it, and so that if that bothers you, some of it is scantily clad women, not too much, but it's just a great game. The theme is there's an army about to attack the city, so you reach for whatever weapon you can find. You can put them in. Some of them are pretty funny because on some of the cards, in one hand you'll have like a giant beam sword, and then in the other hand you'll have a head of lettuce, and to figure out what you want to do with it. So that is my number 2, Custom Heroes.
Never heard of this one either. Although I'm not going to bash the game. I'm just being the butthole today, since that's the word we're going to use, the butthole today. I'm not going to bash the game that you're talking about because who knows, right? Every game's different. Yeah. But the card crafting system that came out with the big staple that they had for that was Mystic Vale, I believe, correct? Mm-hmm. I did not like that game. I did not like the card crafting system.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't really care for it. And I have a couple of friends of mine I had one friend that bought it, and that's the first time I played it and was like, nah. And then I had a coworker that just recently bought it. So of course he's just like, you know how to play? Like, we can play. Like, I don't read the rule books really. We can just sit down and play. And I'm just like, I don't really care for Mystic Vale or whatever. But this game could be different. Whatever. The card crafting thing just didn't land with me. Never really landed.
I played Mystic Vale once, and I thought it was good. Now you generally like deck builders, don't you? It was just the crafting that kind of rubbed you the wrong way.
Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing was kind of like learning it was tough too, which I know I need to kind of remove that from the actual game. But the push your luck element of like you flip over cards and you can keep adding them to your tableau or whatever until you spoil or whatever it's called. Like I don't know. I didn't like that part. The clear cards on the table were sometimes hard to see and like figure out, and then you'd have to slide them into these other cards to make them more powerful. When I got a card that had 3 things, because in Mystic Vale there's like in the card it's a top, a middle, and a bottom. Well, when you get enough, you can kind of feel the thickness of it. Like, do I want to push my luck and draw another card? It feels like it's a pretty good card. Like I think I might know what this card is. I don't know.
So you can that can happen in Custom Heroes because you are putting these finishes or these different ones on your card, but it doesn't matter a ton, or at least that's my opinion, because you take all the cards at the end of the round and you shuffle them together. So you might have had a really great card last round, but now someone else has got it for this round, and so I didn't mind that too much. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think maybe just that different element of like, oh, we shuffle these up and then you get dealt something. Yeah, that seemed like it could work, whatever. But cool, good pick. And how many does that play?
It plays 2 to 6. So up to 6 players. Yep, I would recommend it. 45 minutes, which is about right.
So for my number 2, since you were just talking about deck builders, it is a deck builder. Mm-hmm. It's a deck builder that is cooperative. So it's a cooperative deck building game. I have the legacy version of it to show off. And so, of course, I'll show off the legacy version. I don't have the base game, although I am kind of just going off of just the system. It's not necessarily the legacy part, although, as you know me, I tend to really enjoy legacy ones. I think I may have lagged there for a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to probably get this box in frame for about a second. So you'll have to give me a second. I'm not going to be holding it much, but it's called Aeon's End. This is, like I said,
interesting.
This is the legacy version, although I'm not necessarily saying the legacy version. It's just the one that I have.
Okay.
But it's a deck building game. So this is the legacy game. It's kind of takes place in, it's not fantasy per se. It's kind of like not too distant future, but with like magic because you're casting spells and things like that. And there are monsters, kind of a Starship Troopers monsters and stuff like that. The legacy version has a story, which really, but when it comes to cooperative deck builders, nobody's talking about Aeon's End.
Yep.
They're talking about like the legendary, right? Whatever, pick your poison, the Marvel legendary, Buffy, X-Files. When it comes to cooperative deck builders, nobody talks about this game. And so that's why it's on my list, because I'm like, man, it's underrated. It's really fun. And the legacy gives more value, obviously, to me. But even if I was just playing it as a base game, because you can play this legacy game when you're done. You can kind of just play your own kind of game, and I would totally do that too. And so I think it's underrated because Marvel Legendary gets a lot of love, and it's an okay game for what it is. But this one's quite cool. Unlike most deck builders, which causes a lot of shuffling anxiety, if just like shuffle, reshuffle. I want to make sure I shuffle my deck. In this, I don't know if you know this, Kevin, but this game there's absolutely zero shuffling.
Oh, okay.
So what you do is when you play your cards, you put them in a discard pile, you resolve them, you put them in a discard pile. When you are out of cards to draw, you take your discard pile and you flip it over and you begin again.
Yep.
So, did you know that about this game? It's kind
I didn't know that. So
it's kind of a big hook because people were like, "Oh, cool!" So how you discard cards is going to affect like when you flip it over. Or whatever. So there's some strategy to that, which I never really got into. But
when you said it was a legacy deck builder, this was not the one I thought you were going to pick on here. And I thought it was going to be Clank Legacy. And I was kind of taken aback because that one's getting a lot of buzz right now. And I think you've been playing through that one.
I just won. We finished it off. Just one. So side note. Okay, let's get away from our normal conversation. Let's talk about Clank. I won. We played 12 games. I won 4 of the 12 games. That means I lost 8 games.
Right.
But at the end of the game, how it assesses like who wins the whole game, I ended up winning, and I got this big certificate. It's on my fridge of like Acquisitions Incorporated Employee of the Month. And it looks like, cause I won and so my partners and stuff were like, how did that happen? And like, well, I didn't win the game because I didn't have the most points, but I did these other kind of things, these other little minor objectives. And I did this and this. And so we just literally finished that game like 3 nights ago. And it was kind of a horror show because it was just like, I was so down in the dumps. Like I've only won 4 games, 4 to 8. Like she had 8, I had 4. Like there's no way I'm gonna win. And then it was like, oh, you get stars for doing this, and you get stars for doing this. Not to give the presentation to the audience that like I am just all about winning and I'm a sore loser or whatever. But it was a very surprising moment to be like, oh man, after all those other things, they paid off. I wasn't out like looting and getting all these high scoring things. I was out doing things for our company as an employee and getting stuff done. And that took away my time to go loot the dragon or whatever and get all this gold. And so my scores were always just very low. But at the end, the company was like, you know what, you're a hardworking SOB, so here's a certificate. So that was awesome. That was awesome experience. But yeah, to go back into the
Way to be a
conversation,
corporate shill.
yeah, I got the corporate noose on, and so the Clank is just I didn't put it on my list because it's really popular and people do like it and play it, and I do love it. It's a deck builder. Clank, the regular base game, whatever you want to call it. I played it with a friend of mine. Not impressed. Like, meh, I don't care. Not impressed. They made a legacy version of it, and I was like, well, obviously I have to buy it now. And so, because that's my thing, I love like having stories, and the story in the game is kind of interesting. And it's got a little bit of humor in it, you know. I don't know if you're familiar with Rocky and Bullwinkle, but at the end of the episodes, they always say like, "Come back for Rocky bites again," or and they do that in this. When you read, it's like, "Come back for game 8 for game 8 where blah 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 blah," or "Tisket a tasket. Someone's got my basket," or something. It's like some kind of clever thing. So yeah, it's kind of got a little bit of witty, laughable moments, but like the story was pretty good. It's got an element of like co-op / competitive, because you're all kind of fighting within the same company, but then again, you also like don't want the company to go under because you're fighting against another. You're not fighting, sorry, you're competing against another company. So there are some games where you're like, whoa, dude, we have to team up and like make sure this doesn't happen. And so it does go into like co-op mode for a moment, and then maybe next game it'll be like, okay, every man for himself, you know, I'm going to screw you over. But yeah, Clank is very highly regarded and people really love it. Aeon's End Legacy, anyone talking about it?
Nope. I
Not
haven't
really.
heard a ton. Yeah.
Not really, and it's a really good game.
Cool. Very cool.
Especially if you buy the playmat.
All right. Cool. Number 1. All right. So my number 1 is a game from CMON. And when you think of CMON, you think of these big, grandiose games, lots of miniatures. They could be a little bloated. Rising Sun, Blood Rage. And I have not played Blood Rage yet, but I do enjoy a Rising Sun. But my game is one of their highly under valued games. And that's a game called Potion Explosion. And Potion Explosion is a game. You are students at a wizarding school, not the one you're thinking of. This is a generic wizarding school.
Very generic.
And you are taking your potions.
Almost too generic. I think you know where I'm going with this one.
And you are taking your potions final. And so you have a track, and it has marbles on it that are ingredients. And you pull them out, and when colors of the same kind collide together, they explode, and you get all of the ones of the same color. And you're trying to brew potions which give you special abilities, and you can create some really sweet combos in that game. And it's tactile and it's fun, and I just really love it. If I counted plays on an app of a game, this would be by far my most played game.
Oh, really?
Because I like it, and my fiance really loves the app. We play this one. Play the app quite a bit. And so think of like a Bejeweled or a Candy Crush, and it's satisfying, and it's fun, and it's really good. Potion Explosion by a company that nobody is talking about. And like they're talking about Blood Rage and Rising Sun, but Potion Explosion, pick this game up. It's just a ton of fun.
So before I get into this, Rising Sun, is it good?
I like it. So I think a lot of people have their gripes with it. I like having to team up and cooperate for a little while, and then maybe like, well, I got to break this alliance for this round. So I really like it. I like the monsters in it. I like how combat works in it. So I enjoy that quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah, because I was really interested. Again, it's that designer from Dice Masters that
Yep.
I really like, but it was the price point was pretty high. So I was like, I don't know, maybe I should try playing it first. But anywho, I just wanted to ask you. So Potion Explosion, I was actually paid in board games, which if anyone out there is watching that wants to potentially date a board gamer, that is the way to a board gamer's heart. It's free board
Yes.
games.
Yes.
And so I was paid in free board games by our local Barnes and Noble to show off Potion Explosion, to teach it to people that would show up and kind of
Yeah.
sit down and run the game, or what they would call demoing the game. And so I learned Potion Explosion. I played it a whole bunch, at least the day that I was, did the event.
Yeah. Yep.
I tried it on my own at home first with some of my friends, just so I made sure I had all the rules down. And I just did not like it.
Just kind of fell flat. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it hurts my brain. So I struggle, as you probably know, with like kind of abstract spatial kind of reasoning, and being able to see some of the moves of like, if I take this here, this will shift, which will cause these to. And so, I mean, I can do it, I can try, but there were a couple of times where even demoing the game, I would sit and play, and some little girl would be like, well, why did you take this yellow one right here? Because that's, and I'm like, well, son of a gun, yeah, that would have been a better move. I don't, I don't put a whole lot of thought into it, I guess. Having said that, the game pays off in production value. The marbles are good. The thing that you build to kind of create your little bejeweled kind of arena is perfect. It is kind of satisfying when you pull and like all of them shift and kind of clank together, and then you refill it on the top because there's this like loading kind of a dice tower-esque thing. And that's kind of fun, like for kids and stuff. It's got that tactile sort of thing of dropping marbles in a thing. The potions themselves are kind of tough to shuffle because they're these cutout potions, but it's cool because they hold the marbles, and you can turn them upside down to do like special actions, or drink them, right? You drink them, turn them upside down, and then do special actions. So I can see that there's like a pretty good game here. It's just not for me. The element, the only thing I don't like is just looking at that grid and being like, how can I min-max? How can I maximize getting what I need in the colors that I need and whatnot. So yeah, I'm familiar with this game. I demoed this game. I got some free games out of it.
Cool.
Marvel Legendary actually was what I was paid.
So the first couple of times I played this one, I got smoked. I got this as a Christmas gift, and I took it and I played with my friends, and he got like 30 points, and I'm sitting here with 15, and I'm like, this is dumb. But then I kept playing it more, and now I recognize the strategy of like, oh, you want to set up these moves. Maybe you want to take the help token beforehand, so that you're going to get a good move. And playing on the app helps with that as well, because you can see other moves that people are doing. And so it's a game by a company that people recognize, but I don't think people are talking about. So yeah,
they're not talking about that game.
No, and it's I just think it's so good. So
cool. I definitely am familiar with that pick. So for my number one, I'm gonna just see if we can do. We'll see if we can do a little bit of a like setup and see if you can guess it.
Okay.
My number one is not a legacy game. It is a campaign game. You do play over the course of 10 games. Thematically, you are playing it's a cooperative game. Essentially it's a resource management game where you are playing people working at a hospital, taking care of someone who has just been rushed in on a flight, who's had a severe heart attack or stroke or whatever. And you are spending 10 games trying to figure out like who this person is, because he's in a different country, like nobody knows who he is. You're finding out his history and about his past, so it's got kind of a narrative it doesn't, not kind of, it has a narrative in it. And so that's my number one. Any guesses?
It's something the troubled life of Billy Kerr.
Yep. So
Holding on. That's what it is.
Holding on, the troubled life of Billy Kerr. That is Billy right there. So yeah, it's, if you can kind of see, it's really not a whole lot going on to it as far as thematically, aesthetically. Nobody likes this game. Oh, it's by Hub Games. It's by the designers that did Rory Story Cubes and stuff, and also a guy that's part of Restoration Games. And so Hub Games put this out. Nobody liked it. Even Tom Basil was like not too keen on it. And I get it. This is my number one because it's like, I get it. And I've talked about this on my channel before. You can watch another video about narrative in games, and it's really simple game, and it's very samey. It's resource management. We only have so many people, and we have X amount of shifts. We have a morning shift, an evening shift, and like an overnight shift. And we only have so many people, and we need to, like, can we make this person work a double, because that'll stress them out, and so they get a stress token and things like, it's just, you're just managing resources. And the game, from game to game, is pretty easy, although the finale is impossible to beat. I challenge anyone to show me that they can beat the final game without cheating. It's so hard to beat the game 10, the final one. Anywho, but it's pretty easy. It doesn't really ramp until the last few games. It's kind of easy, but it's really fun. I really enjoyed it, more for the story aspect. So it's one of those things like in a movie where maybe you have a movie in mind where it's like, I really like this movie. Is it a great movie? No. It's long, it's slow. There's some things that aren't that great about it, but you like the way that it ends or something. Like, you like just the whole like experience of it. You know, I say Lord of the Rings trilogy is kind of like that. Like, for me, I still really like it, although I can understand people saying it's so long and boring.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how I feel. This is kind of the Lord of the Rings of the like board games, where it's like, it's long. A lot of it's the same. Legacy games, this is not a legacy game, but usually narrative games switch up what you're doing for each game. As you were talking about kind of off camera before we were recording, you know, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 has like, okay, in this game, you're doing something a little different. This does it a little bit, but in a sense, you're still just freaking staffing your staff and like trying to do all that stuff. And so you're trying to take care of Billy and make sure that he's comfortable, but you're also trying to like provide palliative care and like bedside manner type stuff, and like talk to him and say like, who are you? Where's your next of kin? Like, are you married? And you start hearing these stories. And he comes from a certain area in a certain time period that I'm not going to spoil, that really struck and plucked my rusted old man heartstrings. I just was like, I kind of feel for this guy and some of the crap he's gone through. And by the end, I had a tear in my eye. I say that on my channel. I've said it on the other video when I talk about this game, when I talk about Holding On. I had a tear in my eye at the end when I read like the ending and stuff, and was just like, wow, that was really an emotional thing for me. Is it a great game? No. Mechanically, it's not. And that's why people don't like it, because it's just not intuitive. It's not innovative. It's resource management. It's really just blah, blah, blah. Game 2, what do we do? Set up and just continue on as normal. It's like, game 3, what do we do? Same thing, but we add in this one card that changes the way that we draw cards or something. You know, it's not that great, but it's my number one because I love Holding On, The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr, and I think I'm the only one.
Interesting. I know that you love stories in games and story-driven games. Have you played ones that are kind of in the same ilk or theming, like Stuffed Fables or Comanauts?
I have played Stuffed Fables. It was on my 10x10 2 years ago. So I've played through all of Stuffed Fables, and I'm currently playing Comanauts. It's on my 10x10 this year. So yeah, I'm playing the Comonauts, we've just played one game so far, so can't comment on it too much. It's got that same kind of system. And I have actually in my mailbox right now, I have Jerry Hawthorne's latest one from last year called Aftermath, which is another storybook game where your little animals, kind of like Mice and Mystics sort of, but it's not Mice and Mystics, but you're little mice trying to take care of yourself in this post-apocalyptic world or whatever. Can't comment anything about it. It's in my mailbox right now. So,
okay. So do you like Holding On better than Stuffed Fables or Comonauts, or are they different games?
I can't comment on Comonauts because I'm still just getting into it, right?
Fair enough.
We played the first game and just got our butts handed to us, and it was not a very enjoyable experience because we're like, are we missing a rule here? Like that was, we set it up and we were done. You know, it's like, I'm dead, you're dead, we're dead. You know, so I'll have to get back to you on that one. Stuffed Fables was fun, but it's really geared for kids.
Yes.
As I'm sure you know. And so I wouldn't recommend that for like some real serious gamers. Like we're going to do like a dungeon crawl. No, it's a dungeon crawl for 8-year-olds.
Sure.
9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, whatever, for kids. So what's the question? Would I like Holding On better than Stuffed Fables or than those games? I would say that I like mechanically Stuffed Fables and storybook games are much better. Like I've already said, I know I'm repeating myself, Holding On is kind of a lot of samey stuff, you know. And for me, the sense of exploring, the sense of discovery of like, whoa, in our fourth game we get to add these cards into our deck and they change how things work, and this is going to be exciting because it feels like a new game. Holding On doesn't do a whole lot of that stuff. Stuffed Fables or the storybook games by Jerry Hawthorne, who works for not Cool Mini, not Plaid Hat.
Yep.
They do that. They do have these cool like moments of discovery of like, oh, cool. Now we have this in our game. I got a cool thing that my character has now or something. So I would say I like those better, but those get a lot of praise. Holding On doesn't. So that's why it's got to be on my list and not Stuffed Fables.
Okay. So I mean, I know that you said you teared up a little bit at the end. Does it kind of have arcs of you really identify with this character and you empathize with them and then you don't? Or is it kind of a lot of build for some payoff? Is it a heavy emotional type of game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't know anything about this guy. He's had a heart attack. Flying from, I believe it's London to somewhere. I'm sure it says on the back of the box. And so they have to land the plane. So he's in the middle of nowhere. He has no ID or anything like that. He's dying. You don't know anything about him. And it's got some, as you talk to him, which is kind of the point of the game. The point of the game is not to have him like die. Okay. That's, you lose the game, obviously. But then the other point is to try to get these narrative objectives of like, who do you have anyone that you like, a loved one, a significant other, and then there's kind of like, oh, that's the story of that, and like your kin, you know, your kids, and that's the story of that. And then he talks about when he was younger, he grew up in this certain time period of things. I won't really spoil, in a certain something that happened in a certain part of the country known as the Troubles. And so like there's that kind of aspect to it, and be like, oh, so you witnessed a lot when you were, you know, when you were a kid. So yeah, it's got a lot of that heavy stuff of like, man, this is really like a sad guy. And I teared up. I mean, I wasn't weeping, let's not like exaggerate, but I was, when I read the final card and stuff, was just like, that's our game. That was fun, you know. Game's
like
over.
Kind of a Field of Dreams moment.
Dreams. Yeah.
You don't tear up when you watch the last scene of Field of Dreams?
I've never seen the last scene.
Never mind.
I don't. I know the whole colloquial, like, if you build it, they will come. But I don't think I've seen it or caught it on cable or anything.
Fair enough. So
probably the wrong reference. Maybe Shawshank Redemption or something. Maybe it would be a better reference. Or the Green Mile. That one I
Green
chewed up
Mile.
on.
Oh, the Green Mile is so
Yeah.
good. So.
And so yeah, holding on gives you that kind of emotional, like if you really get into like who this guy is and stuff, it's quite good. Thematically, great. Gameplay wise, a lot of the same. So
Yeah.
and I'm just repeating myself at this point. So those are our top 5 underrated games or games that I like to play that other people in the community or my friends are like, oh, not Call to Adventure, not that again.
Yep.
And so I did put down a few honorable mentions kind of just as we were talking off the fly. You said you actually prepared some. So why don't we
I have them
talk
here.
about some honorable mentions. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a few honorable mentions. One of my first ones is called On Tour, and
I knew this was going to be. I knew you were going to talk about this game.
So On Tour it's a roll and write game, and you have 2 D10s. You have a dry erase board that's a map of the continental U.S., and you are trying to make a 100-day bus tour for your rock and roll band or your country band or whoever. And so you put the numbers in the spaces, and you draw lines to them, and you try and connect as many as possible. It's very good. I like it. It plays quick. There's some strategy to it, and there's some agonizing decisions of like, oh well, I really messed up, and I can't put this number here where I want it because you're flipping over cards and it says you can't. So I like it. The problem is this game is fairly recent. I believe it came out in 2018 or 19. There's one place you can get it, and that is direct from the manufacturer. The manufacturer is a company called Board Game Tables, so you can't really find this game on Amazon. You can't find it on Cool Stuff Inc. And so I didn't want to put this on a list because I wanted all of my games to be available. Of like, just can't get it right now. So that's one of my honorable mentions is on Tour. So I enjoyed this game a lot.
I came up with a honorable mention that's the same thing. It's gotten some pretty big buzz, but it's not in retail. You can't just type it in on Amazon and be like, boom, ordered it. And so I'll throw that one out there. It's called Seventh Continent. And honestly, looking back, since you and I did the solo games, I'm kind of slapping myself in the face why I didn't even talk about Seventh Continent for solo games, because this is a really great game. In the Seventh Continent, you're laying out cards and exploring the 7th continent of the world and finding some crazy stuff and putting some things together. And I've always died, and I've always kind of cheated because you play for like 3 hours, and then when you die, the game says clean everything up and start over. And I'm like, I'll just go back this far. I'm not like, you know what I mean? Like kind of, I do the same thing with like Time Stories, but Seventh Continent is a Kickstarter game. You can't just type it in on Amazon. I mean, and get it. I got mine actually because I put a whole lot of gone between myself and Kickstarter. I got mine from someone who sold theirs on eBay, and it wasn't cheap. And so I was like, so I got it. And so an honorable mention would be Seventh Continent. It does have some buzz, but I just didn't think about putting it on because you can't really get it.
Didn't they announce that a retail version of this game is coming? Perhaps?
Possibly.
Okay, so I know that it was on Kickstarter for a while, and it's had a couple of different printings, and I thought somewhere around the line they're like, okay, we're going to streamline part of it, and we're going to release that to retail. And I think it was controversial because a lot of people who backed it on Kickstarter are like, what the heck? You said this wasn't coming to retail. Like you said, this is the only place we could get it. So, yeah.
I do know the price point has gone down because I did pay quite a bit of it buying it off of some dude on eBay that kind of milked me for it, and now it's like $59.99 or something like that. But yeah, that's one. Do you have a different one? Another one?
I do. I have some more. So my next honorable mention that I thought about is a game called Dale of Merchants. And this is specifically the collection of us. They're all sorts of animals. So you have owls, and I think that's an iguana, and a monkey, and a polecat.
Okay.
So this game is a deck building game, and think kind of a la Smash Up. You sit down and play, and you pick different decks of animals or different factions of animals. You take them, you shuffle them together, and then that's the market that you have to try and pull these out. And you're building up a stall of different cards. I like this. I've played this a couple of times. It is pretty new. I think I just got it this past summer. The company that produces this one is in Finland, I believe. And so this I kind of has that same problem of like it's a great game, and I wish people were talking about it more. But it's hard to get right now. I think that they are going to have ones out in the U.S. That will be available, but it is not right now. So you can't get it, and that's why I didn't make my list. I really like it. I think the artwork is fantastic. How the different animals and the different sets interact with it are very cool, and it's just fun. It's just hard to get. So that's why it didn't make my list.
Another honorable mention of mine is by Fantasy Flight Games. It is a trick-taking game, and they put it under their IP because they own the IP to the Lord of the Rings. And so it's do you have this?
No, I don't have this one. I don't even know if I know what this one is.
Oh, it's called The Hobbit. It's just a little square. I have it here. I didn't prepare. Like I said, I just kind of came up with this on the fly. It's about this big, little box. It's just cards. It's just a trick-taking game. But it adds an element of kind of a bad guy. Well, depending on how many players you have, you could have two bad guys, and then the rest of you are. So you take a role. Like I'm Gandalf, you're Frodo, you're so and so. You're a Balrog, and you're Saruman or something. Just depending on how many players you have, and by taking tricks and stuff, each cards, because usually when you take the trick, you take the cards. And so sometimes those cards will have like good things in them to heal yourself, or they'll be attack cards and you'll want to like attack them. And so it's kind of a weird, it's like trick taking, but it's kind of with teams. And so you're battling maybe one versus all. And it was kind of fun. Admittedly, I've only played it maybe once or twice, but I thought it was like, this is a interesting kind of good guys and bad guys, but with like a trick taking format to it and stuff. And so, but again, nobody talked about it. It went totally under the radar. It was not played at all. So yeah, The Hobbit by Fantasy Flight Games. It's just a little deck of cards.
So one of my other honorable mentions is a game that I've heard some rumblings about, and I think it might be out of print right now, and so that's my main reason. It's not very old. Again, it's just hard to get, and that's a game called Baseball Highlights 2045.
Oh, cool.
And so Baseball Highlights 2045 is it's baseball with a cyberpunk theme to it. The year is 2045. People think that baseball is boring as all get out. That is too long. And so they took games, they shortened them to 6 innings. They said that players can get cybernetic enhancements. They allowed robots to play. And so you're playing that out. You start with a team of 10 players. And you will draw 6, 1 for each inning, and you go back and forth with your opponent. And you try and mitigate some of the hits that they are showing. It's really good. So robots tend to be better at hitting, cyborgs tend to be better at pitching, and then naturals tend to be better at defense. And so you're going through that, and then once you finish a game, depending on how many points you played out, you get to buy new cards and add them into your deck, and you get to draw them right away. And so it's really cool. I've had a lot of fun with this game. I've played it a good bit, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. It does help if you like baseball a little bit more. But even if you don't, I think there's a game there that I really enjoy. So
I want to play this one. I want to play this one with you because I've been looking for kind of not aggressively, but kind of passive aggressively looking for a good sports game like a football.
Yep.
And I know they have like Blitz Bowl or something and
Yep.
whatnot. And I do have a baseball game that's a 2-player only called Bottom of the Ninth, which
Yep.
is okay. I'll play it here and there. And so I did see this one on a list somewhere and was like, I want to try this. I didn't know you had it though. I'd be interested to play it with you.
Funny story about that is a friend of mine got it and he just never played it or whatever, and so he gave it to a friend who was like, I didn't want to learn it, I didn't want to play it, and it ended up giving it to me. So it just kind of has been passed around. Yeah, I really enjoy it. Like I said, it does help if you are a little bit of a baseball fan. In general, there aren't that many great sports games out there.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there are good racing games out there, and that's kind of it. I have not found a good hockey game or basketball. I don't really like basketball, but Baseball Highlights 2045 falls in there. It's one that I actually enjoy. So
cool. I want to play it with you sometime.
Cool.
So
I would be down.
Another one that I have to talk about is that this game originally came out in the early 80s, I believe.
Yeah.
And people enjoyed it. As far as I know, I wasn't really around during this time, but people really enjoyed it, really liked the mechanisms, thought it was very innovative at the time. And the company, whoever the company was, lost the licensing to be able to do it. The licensing went back to the estate of the family. I believe it's an IP game, so it's based on some lore. And so the oldest sibling, I believe, you're gonna have to Wikipedia all this stuff. The oldest sibling.
I'm fact checking you right now.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if it's the oldest sibling or if it was someone. It went to the estate, and the person in charge of the estate basically said, "No mas, like no, we're not putting the licensing out. We're not giving it out." And so this game became a dead game, and it became a super rare game, like very hard to find. Like, oh, if you can find this game, and so it just went dead for 30 years. And finally, I think Gale Force 9 was able to, they finally gave out the licensing for board games and said, okay, remake the game, let's do it again. And Gale Force 9 ended up getting a hold of it and putting out this game that people were like, oh, I would love if this game came back. I'm so excited if this game came back. And then they announced it's coming back and it's going to look sweet and it's going to look nice. And people were excited about it. And then it actually came out and nobody said bupkiss about it at all. And it's actually in the back over here. It's Dune, the board game.
Yeah.
And so the one that I have behind me is the new printing of it, which I bought, which regardless of how the gameplay goes, I don't want to waste too much time already because there are some pros and cons to it because it is based on kind of an archaic, primitive 1980s system.
Yeah.
But for the fact of how much I saw or heard Dune fans, I'm on a Dune Facebook page and stuff of people like so crazy about it, and it came out and it's just like, who bought it? Who's playing it? Like, who enjoys this game? And I think part of that has to deal with, and again, I won't go into everything because we'll be here all day. Part of it is the complexity is very high. There's like 8 phases that you have to, okay, this phase we do this, and this phase we do this. So it's not an easy war, but it's a war game. It's an area control, very much like Risk, except in the Dune universe and stuff like that. It's a game I do enjoy. I thought it was pretty fun. It might be a little broken, maybe, but that's one that would probably be a good honorable mention for underrated because it's like y'all wanted this game and then they put it out and made no money on it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's crazy. I know that Fantasy Flight printed like their version because they had the rights for a while, didn't they? And then they lost it, and so then they printed Rex, which is the Twilight Imperium universe. And
which I've not played.
Yeah,
Not not played it.
I don't think I've played Rex, but I've played Twilight Imperium before, so.
I haven't played either of them. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was familiar with like Rex was like, we kind of took the Dune game and made it in our own worlds or whatever, but I hadn't
Yeah.
played it. But
Yeah.
I enjoy Dune a lot. I'm excited for the new movie this year. The book I read for a college class and wrote a paper on and stuff. I think it's like Lord of the Rings in space, kind of this epic space story or tale or whatnot. But yeah, man, when the game came back around, no one cared. Really, no one cared. Not like
That's
Restoration, like the Restoration games, when they come out, they make like thousands, like billions of dollars. This one like went under the radar. No one really bought it.
Yeah.
I have one more honorable mention. Do you have anything else?
So I have Dice Masters. So let's talk about your honorable mention, and then we'll talk Dice Masters for a moment.
So this one I'm leaving towards last because it's a game I don't play a whole lot. It's kind of light. It's a game, and you're gonna have to help me on this because I'm not gonna Google it, but it's called CV, which stands for like your resume in Latin. Oh man, people are gonna make fun of me so much. Something curriculum vitae or something like that. CV, and it's basically a game kind of a la Splendor, where you're taking a person from being a baby or like a young adult, riding your bike around, and you're moving through this deck, and the deck is preset to where you have like young adult, like middle age, and then old age or whatever, and then like at the end you die, not in a tragic like, oh, you die, but it's like the game's over and you're trying to basically live your life and like collect this job, and you can kind of tell a story as you collect these cards. You're like, I'm a PhD graduate that lives in an apartment that rides a bicycle to work every day. And you're like, oh, that's kind of my mix of who my character is. Oh, and I also have 2 kids and stuff. And some of it's thematic because you have happiness levels and things like that. But essentially the game is what people don't like about it. I think it's gets into the underrated category is it's Yahtzee with little different faces on the dice. So you roll, you keep what you want, you roll. And then if you don't roll what you need, you're kind of stuck. There are some cards that allow you to borrow from like the left player to the left or right or whatever. It's got cutesy artwork, kind of cartoony artwork. You can collect sets because certain things are health. Some of them are jobs. Some of them are personal, like happiness, and they're different color coded. So you stack them kind of like Splendor, like in your tableau in front of you and stuff. And there's certain game end scoring that you can do based on how happy you were and what you got accomplished and stuff. It's not a super fun game, but it is fun to play, and like not a lot of people play it. They did try to revamp and get some more excitement into it by creating CV Pocket or something like that. Again, you're gonna have to fact check me, but it's like more of just a dice game. They streamlined it into, I know I saw a review of it online, where it was just a shorter, just dice rolling without the board, without all the cards, comes with these little bits that you use for like happiness and sadness and stuff like that. But CV, I thought, was a pretty fun game. No one wants to play it with me. No one really plays it. So have you heard of this?
I have not heard of this one at all. So
CV, like curriculum vitae. It means like your resume. Your life. Yeah.
Cool.
And so
yeah, I would give it a shot, but yeah, I have not heard of this one. So
the only draw for me is like the Yahtzee thing is okay, it's overplayed. The card building tableau thing can be frustrating sometimes because you're buying from a market or you're drafting from a market, and like sometimes you just can't afford what you want and stuff, and you're building an engine, and your engine can get broken pretty easy in the game if you're not paying attention. But the thing that I like about it is I think it's fun because you look at your cards, and like I said, you could be like, I am a journalist that works in Africa with, these cards that you collect are basically events and things in your life. I'm also a health freak, and so like I'm really athletic, but I have no job or something like that. So you can kind of like explain your character and explain the life of the person that you're playing in the game, and that's what I like about it. Some of the mechanisms are whatever.
Cool.
And so that's my last kind of impromptu one for the list.
Yep.
So Dice Masters, what else do we want to say about it?
So I had Dice Masters. I pulled it out. I found all my cards, and I like this game. I actually haven't played it in probably 2-3 years. I like
really?
it's been a while.
Yeah.
And Dice Masters hit pretty hard when it first came out. I think it was nominated for Game of the Year from Dice Tower. I think it might have been nominated for a Golden Geek in 2014. And so people enjoyed it at one point. And now,
they had tournaments.
Yeah.
Not just where I live, but they had like regional, national tournaments, like Magic the Gathering does.
So the reason why I didn't put this one on my list and I had it in honorable mentions is because it was a collectible game at one point. I don't know what set to tell people to get. Because you can go onto Amazon and you could be like, oh yeah, the X-Men set or this starter set or this one. So there's that. And then the other problem I have is like you should get a starter set and then a pile of boosters as well. And it's just hard to be like, yep, get this set. This is the definitive best set out there. And maybe that doesn't matter for some people because maybe they have no problem being like, oh, yeah, this is Justice League and this is the Dungeons and Dragons and just mix them together and go. So, and maybe they're fine with that. Yeah, it's good. And I wish it was still out there. I looked it up, and they're still making sets. They had a set come out in February, and that was a WWE set. So if you like wrestling,
that's right. Yeah, I did. I did know that.
I haven't played any of the campaign boxes, and maybe that would like really get me back in. So I think Dice Masters tried a model that outside of Magic the Gathering nobody cared about. Making it collectible. I thought it was cool. I thought the booster packs were a good price point. Go in with $5 and get a nice stack of boosters. I thought that was cool. But apparently I'm just one of the only ones. Yeah.
Do you have like it all like boxed up and?
So like I have I have different teams in boxes here that I put together.
Yeah. I have those too.
I have.
Actually,
I have a stack of dice here. I have a bag of cards and dice here. Yeah,
that's got to be Batman.
Oh,
maybe not.
Like, yeah. I think Dice Masters was a game that I liked it more than Magic because I don't really like the meta of Magic. Of like, oh, I don't know what this person's going to have in their deck. Well, you spent way more money on that deck than I did. Like I like to play Magic very casually. And so with Dice Masters, the nice thing is I can see I can see your whole team. I can see what you're going to try and pull out. So I think it mitigated it a little bit. And I just like some of the stuff they're doing, but nobody talks about it anymore.
And some of the cards have like global effects. And so it's like, I'm playing with this guy, but that effect is for everyone. So you get to find out like, oh, Professor Xavier does this. I'm definitely going to be using that. Even though you're playing with him and I'm not, I still get to use that global effect. So that's kind of fun because it's like, I want to play with like Professor X because he's a really powerful character and this is a powerful card, but it kind of balances out because it's like, it gives an effect to your opponent or whatever. and
Yeah.
stuff. And I do like the action cards. You know, you bring two, they bring two, or however
Yep.
it works and stuff. And so it's like, hey, you brought a cool action card. Oh,
Yep.
I will take one of those, and put it in my
Yep.
bag and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a really great game.
Yep.
The thing that's missing from it is you
Towards
really
the
need,
end,
yeah, you
um,
really need some play mats. I think is really a big deal, because if you just play on the, oh, cool, sweet. See, I got little tiny ones.
yep.
Where'd
I,
you
I
pick?
so I think I picked this up at a game store, and they had some Dice Master sets, and they had one. It was all on clearance because nobody is talking about this game anymore, and so I'm just like, well, I'll pick up that playmat. Um, it's weird because this is with my Dice Master stuff. I should put it with the rest of my playmats, but I think that when the world goes back to normal, we're recording this in April of 2020, so it's kind of a crazy time. When it goes back to normal, and if we do a marathon session like we talked about,
Yeah,
we should try and play some Dice Masters together. I
yeah.
think that would be pretty sweet. So um, yeah, I know for a little while towards the end, they were doing team packs, which were kind of cool. So these are teams that already synergize well together, and then you could kind of
Cool.
put that together.
Good.
So I love Dice Masters, and I don't know what happened that they couldn't get going. I don't know if they were not producing enough content, if it's the wrong publisher that was putting money behind it. I don't know, but
Magic the Gathering is just too big.
yep,
It's just got too big of a shadow. You have got like Netrunner,
yep,
dead for the second time. You
yeah,
have L5R, which is Legend of the Five Rings, practically dead. I mean,
yep,
Fantasy Flight hasn't officially released it, but like nobody's playing
yeah,
L5R really. And everyone's playing Magic. And so Dice Masters just fell under that shadow of like, people are like, oh, cool. Yeah, no, let's just play Magic.
yep.
That's just my opinion. I'm totally subjective when it comes to Magic because I'm not a
I,
fan. So,
so I think the other one, and I didn't really consider this for the list just because it's too new, and I think there's still a decent amount of buzz, is Keyforge. Um, I I imagine that in 3, 4, 5 years it'll probably fall into that same one.
yeah,
I like Keyforge far better than I like Magic, um,
I've never played it.
and Fantasy Flight recently did
A Marvel
announce.
thing, right? Didn't
Well,
like
they are doing Marvel Champions, which is a
champions.
cooperative living card game, but they announced some heavy cash prizes for Keyforge. I want to say like $20,000 for the national championship or the world championship.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. I think it's one that you just can't pull the Magic players away from Magic the Gathering, and it's a shame. I have some extra sealed Keyforge decks because I found a box that on Amazon for like $30. They're normally like 90. I'll have to just give you a deck
Wow.
or two, and we'll have to play it as well.
Yeah, I've
Because,
never played it.
yep.
I'd like to.
Um,
It's another Richard Garfield game.
yep. It's interesting. This is not a Keyforge video, but hearing his thoughts about it, because he did Magic and he's like, well, that's great. And then he said, Keyforge is the game that I really wanted to design.
We
And
did. He did Netrunner as well.
yep. Oh, he did. I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah. He did Netrunner and he did King of Tokyo, and yeah,
Yeah, King in Tokyo, I enjoy, but he said that Keyforge is the game that he wished he would have been able to design. The cool thing about Keyforge is just get a deck and go. And there are decks that are better than others, but I'm not going to have the same deck as anyone else. I'm not going to take time to hunt down those cards and to buy them. And I like that. Like I said,
yeah.
like the meta of Magic the Gathering. So
The hunt.
the hunt, I spent lots of money on this deck, and so it's super competitive, and there are ways to get around that. To, if you play in a booster draft, that's something that I enjoy. Commander kind of mitigates that a little bit, and so they're doing things to address that, but Magic is just not for me. So
My brother is a big advocate for Magic, and so when we talk
Yep.
on the phone, we are constantly I'm always like, no, and he's like, yeah, but try it this way, and nah, blah, blah. But he says Commander is probably the way to play. He's like, if you're a casual player, you should play Commander. I don't know what that means, really, what Commander means, but that's probably for a different video.
Yeah.
So I don't really play. I like playing at Runner. I like L5R. I like Dice Masters and stuff.
Yep.
These are all games that we enjoy. So that's probably we probably rambled on a bit too much. As far as just keeping to our top 5 underrated games, our honorable mentions were pretty cool, and we had a lot of those. And so I'm just going to go ahead and like wrap up the video and just say thanks for watching. I plan on doing some top 5 videos with some other people, and I'm sure Kevin and I will immediately hop on and come up with another category. The next one that I've got in the works is 2-player games, strictly 2-player games, not games that you can play best of 2, but just 2-player games. And so that's kind of in the mix for coming up on the channel within the next week or so. And so everyone, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with us. If you're still here after this long, thank you, Kevin, for joining me. I'm sure we will be doing this again. So as always, everyone, thanks for watching, and I will see y'all at the next video.
All right, see you later.